Hello YouTubers, went to S.E.L.W.G in Crystal Palace yesterday and just like to show my loot or haul as we say. I saw Fraser's, Von Ketteringham's video yesterday. He said it was very quiet and it was. Um, I had a good look round, I was in there for over 3 hours and as I said in one of my messages that I put up, you can always tell, I think, how things are with the bring and buy store. I mean, I remember a few years ago going and you couldn't get within 3 or 4 people deep and see what was on the table. Yesterday there was no such problems, unless it got busier after 1:30 when I left. But it was altogether a lot more quieter an affair. There seemed to be a significant number of people down on even last year, and last year wasn't particularly busy in my opinion. But nonetheless, it was quite interesting. Unusually, there was a couple of Osprey books that I was after, which I couldn't get. There was about 2 or 3 bookstalls there with lots of Osprey, but I was unable to get those. But I got a number of things, and like Fraser said, had there been more there, I would have spent more. But let me just show you what I got anyway. First couple of items are a little bit maybe unusual. S.E.L.W.G, the club, were selling their polo shirts for £1, and well, you've got to, haven't you, really, at £1. So I got a couple of those. And in terms of the hobby proper, I managed to pick up a box of mini art Burgundian mounted knights. I'm going to try and do a small Burgundian army in 1/72 plastic, and I was having trouble picking up these mini art figures. I usually go with Hannant's, the model shop in London, and order them through those, but they didn't seem to have the Burgundians, and so I was lucky to pick this box up. There's always a considerable amount more work involved preparing these sort of figures in general than in Perry Miniatures, for example, or any 28s. But this is my first love with the Airfix figures. Like most of us, I started out with Airfix figures, and I still like doing them. So, or similar to Airfix, I should say. So I picked up a box of these, £6.99. That's quite reasonable. I also, although I'm not particularly interested in the Second World War or indeed airborne operations, I managed to get a first edition of Donald Featherstone's Wargaming Airborne Operations. And now I believe it's been reissued, but with new photographs, and it's never quite the same anyway as the original, and paid £10 for that. And as I say, although I'm not mad keen on the subject, I am interested, but it's full of Airfix stuff, layouts, Airfix models and figures, and altogether a very charming book of its time, which I'm talking as if it's like centuries old, but 1977, which seems a long time ago now. And anything by Donald Featherstone, of course, worth having. But the photographs alone have a tremendous charm to them. So although it's been reissued, I'm pretty sure it's been reissued in the Curry range of books, the reprints for Wargamers. That's the original, and I was quite pleased. I didn't buy it first time round, and then I had that decision time when I decided to actually I would go for the book and rush back to the stand, thinking if this is not there, I'm going to regret it. A good dusting, which is the Sudan campaigns, just a £5. So that's got a lot of illustrations. Let me see, it's got a number of period photographs, and including the Gordon Relief Expedition 1884. It's full of good things, really. It's as I say, for £5, it's a nice thing to read. Takes you right through to Omdurman 1898. So that's an old interest of mine. I'm not into it at the moment, but I thought it was too good to miss this particular book. That's by Henry Keown Boyd. And I then purchased a couple of tins of paint just to top up, and a lot of the figure stands. The figure stands, I found these particularly nice to really. I don't do a lot of wargaming. I mainly paint Wargames figures, and then just collect them. So I'm not any problem with any particular sort of frontage or depth or type of bases, but I think a dozen or so figures on these bases look quite nice. So I got those, and just a few of the square ones, and the actual like 1p size bases. So you know, that'll do me for. I've got a couple of boxes of Strelets Burgundians coming. Sorry, red box Burgundians coming up to collect from the Hannant store in London, and so I'm going to be basing those soon. I finished the Boer War, which I did in a previous video, and as I say, it's you know, I'm going through the plastic figures quite reasonably now. You know, a bit more work. I don't particularly enjoy scraping flash off of them. I don't suppose anyone does. But once I get to the point where I can actually start painting, I enjoy that greatly. So I enjoy, I think, taking ordinary plastic figures that sometimes are a little bit crude from some of the manufacturers. I mean, at the moment I'm doing Ultimate Ratio. The Swiss pikemen and halberdiers, and they're very nice figures actually. I mean, to start with, a little bit of flash here and there, but I've got an awful lot of colour to go on those. I mean, it seems like anything goes. Their trousers and their tabards are all quartered, and so it's going to be quite involved. It's going to be quite a long process to paint them up, and as I say, they're down in size from my usual 28mm, which I've done an awful lot of Perrys. I've done everything from Warlord Games also. I've done everything from Crusades through to Anglo-Zulu War, you know, Wars of the Roses, and I got reasonably good at my own level. I mean, nothing like some of you guys on there, but facial detail and shading, I was quite pleased with what I was turning out, at least for me. But I've gone down to 1/72, 20mm or 25mm, and you know, I'm going to stick at them. You know, they're a little bit tedious, as I say, in the preparation stage. From Henry Hyde's excellent Wargames Compendium, I got the tip to soak the figures for a couple of hours or even a couple of days in white spirit vinegar to help etch the detail onto them, and that seems to work. That does seem to key up the paint nicely, and so there is a considerable process of scraping and removing of flash, and then varnishing them in gloss varnish to stiffen up the figures. I mean, you know, we all know about the bendy swords and bendy axes and all these things, but yeah, once I get through that initial 3 or 4 phases of preparation and get to the point of painting, it's you know, I don't need facial detail on 1/72, really. A bit of barbarian flesh and a bit of shading, and it's good enough anyway for me. As I say, the show yesterday, much enjoyable. A bit of a hellish trip through London. 45-minute journey became 2.5 hours with all road closures and traffic, and it was a lot quieter. Like Fraser said, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, it seemed a little bit flat there. You know, I guess because there was a lot less people. You know, you walked around quite comfortably, which is great. I mean, you could get to any of the tables. I made a small video, 4.5 minute video of some of the games which I liked, including one that featured old Britain's toy soldier style figures, a Sudan campaign, and you were able to wander around at leisure, which is not always the case. I think people are just obviously, you know, it's no big news, but we're all buying off the internet, and sometimes we look out the window on a rainy Sunday and we think, I can't really be bothered. I've gone for about 4-5 years in a row now, and many years before that on and off, but it's certainly quietened down, and I would put that to the fact that most people have got whatever items hobby related that they want on the internet. I went myself just for a few things that I find a little bit more difficult to pick up, you know, particular bases, and I just picked up a couple of books, you know, that took my fancy, but all in all an enjoyable day, and you know, I must have walked around there about half a dozen times, and you know, it's always good news to chat to a few people in the hobby when you're working on your own most of the time. I am anyway. I don't have a friend who is interested in this particular hobby. My friends tend to be more car orientated, classic cars, and that. So you know, the hobby is quite specific, really. You're either interested or you're not, and so a chance to talk to a few people there, and just be in that atmosphere for, well, 3.5 hours, and yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'll probably still go, because I don't go to that many. I go to S.E.L.W.G at the beginning of the year, and I probably won't go up to I think is it Colours at the Rivermead Leisure Centre in Reading. I used to go to that. Not so sure about the journey up to Reading now. So I'll probably just keep it to the 2 or 3 shows that I go to. Went to Partisan this year, but I hope there's something of interest for you, and you know, I'll start to try and get a bit more professional in terms of camera angles and things like that. At the moment, I'm just you know, winging it. So all the best to all of you, and see you next time. Thank you.